Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now changing language, obviously, to English. Our first seminar this morning is Rema Nanavaty. She's the head of Self-Employed Women's Association of India, also called SEWA, an organization that since 1972 organizes the poor women workers in India to bargain for their rights and representation. She has achieved numerous of awards for her work. Among others, she was honored by the government of India in 2013 by bestowing on her the Padma Shri, the fourth highest civilian award. Her organization, SEWA, is the recipient of the Right Livelihood Award, also known as the Alternative Nobel Prize. The presentation will be followed by a conversation with Kristina Henschen, head of Union to Union. And this seminar will be held and interpreted in English. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now an honor for me to welcome up on stage with an applause, Rema Nanavaty. Welcome up on stage. Great. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Namaste. Good morning to everyone. I apologize, I don't speak Swedish, and I hope you will not mind my speaking in English. It's been my great honor and a privilege to be standing here representing the 2 million women workers and at the Self-Employed Women's Association, SEWA. What does human rights mean for the poor women workers in India? And I think they are very important to human development. And SEWA has been fully in support of that for the last 43 years. But perhaps time has come to broaden and sharpen the definition of human rights to use some of the inherent rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. First such right is right to work, decent, meaningful, and productive work for our 2 million women workers. Today, we live in the 21st century, globalized world and rapid economic growth. Let us take you to the reality of SEWA's more than 2 million women workers in India. They put in 16 to 18 hours of work each day, yet earn very low wages and have hardly any assets. According to SEWA's founder Ela Bhatt, poverty is a form of violence with the consent of the society. We as a society have agreed to keep poor people poor. We make the poor vulnerable. Therefore, at SEWA, we believe that economic freedom, organizing to seek freedom from poverty, hunger, and starvation, is a human right. To live a life of dignity and self-respect is the right of every human being. Right to life and right to livelihood or work cannot be separated. We at SEWA strive to organize and achieve right to work by ensuring economic security. Our members call it the second freedom or the economic freedom. So how do the members of SEWA organize? This is Puriben. When SEWA started organizing the members in the dry desert area where she lives in the early 80s, we saw that every household had a woman who embroidered. Yet they were all digging earth on the relief sites. They earned only rupees 75 a month, which is just slightly more than $1. That too for a whole month. Here was a skill which had the potential to turn into livelihood. And then I met hundreds and thousands of women like Puriben. Puriben, a natural leader and a fearless pioneer. I told her that if she could find women willing to embroider for a fair pay, I would bring them work and pay cash. Puriben and four other women took on the job of embroidering kurtas, and in the same first week, they earned rupees 150. The women earned around rupees 500 a month, sitting right at home. Sure enough, word got around, and next time round, more women joined. Puriban started organizing more and more women with embroidery and other craft skills in village after village. And in 2 years' time, she had organized more than 15,000 women artisans. The women's embroidery is now the major source of income and livelihood in the area. Almost all the 15,000 women artisans, all illiterate. Today, a skilled embroiderer can earn up to rupees 10,000 Indian rupees a month, where earlier the women were earning only about $1 a month. Now the families have assets, land, water, pump, tractor, house, savings, insurance, children attend school, migration has stopped, women's employment has brought about a change in the family dynamics as well as in the community. Given the perpetual struggle for water in the area, Puriben took on the challenge of building rainwater harvesting structures like village ponds, roof rainwater harvesting tanks, hand pump, recharging of wells. For that, she needed the support of the men of the village, especially the village council of the water authorities. It was not easy. The women were scorned, dismissed, and turned down. But you all know that when we women organize, we are a persistent force and a resilient force. Their goal was to bring water to their village and into their homes for drinking as well as for agriculture. Because where there's water, there's agriculture. And where there's agriculture, there's work for the men. So, in a way, the women were changing and bringing about work for the men in the villages. They began the process of empowering the men. Today, the villages in the area have clean water to drink, crops in their fields, and flowers and fruits in their yards. It has taken more than a decade. But the women and their collectives have changed the land and the people. Thus, by enhancing and building on the skills and the knowledge a woman already has, she gains confidence in her own abilities. She also gains strength from the camaraderie of other women. So, coming together on the basis of work allows women to set in motion a transformation of herself and of her community. In other words, right to life is right to work. Right to work needs to start from the right to start from where the woman is. And individual right to work must be made collective to be enforceable for the poor women. At SEWA, we follow a need based, demand driven approach to organizing the women to enforce right to work. The communities themselves are the designers and implementers of all community based activities under the leadership of women. By organizing themselves into cooperatives and federations, the members develop collective bargaining power and create for themselves alternative sources of employment. In other words, women build capacity to demand and enforce right to work. Building human capacity is a must to enforce human rights of poor women. Rights without capacities mean a little for the poor. Second such right of women is the right to access to energy. Let me take you to another young woman in the conflict affected area of Kashmir in India. This is Rubina Akhtar, a 21-year-old Muslim girl from Kashmir who lost her father in the political turmoil. Although Rubina wanted to study, she had to drop out of school to help her mother with household chores. The family ate just one meal a day. Worries about their future plagued her day and night. Then an opportunity came by her way. Rubina came in a group of 25 women to SEWA to take a month long training in assembling and repairing solar lights. Villages around her hometown of Kupwara rarely have electricity, and the women collect firewood for cooking and heating. So Rubina was eager to introduce solar lights to relieve women like her mother from the drudgery of collecting wood. Talking to and listening to the life struggles of other women and how they overcame them made her realize that she was indeed strong. She could make a difference. Rubina went back to Kupwara, her village, and organized a group of women to assemble and sell solar lights. The men in the village, none too happy that a young girl like her dared to set up a new enterprise. They challenged her. If you are any good, why don't you repair this light? And they pointed to the solar light in the village mosque. Rubina humbly accepted the challenge, quietly set to work, and in a flash, the light started working. The Maulvi, the clergyman, was so impressed that he himself came to honor her. His approval opened the door for other girls like her. Therefore, we all can see that when women have access to energy, it generates livelihood opportunities, but also earns her respect from the society, the community, and gives her the dignity. It also relieves them from the drudgery of collecting and doing very hard and strenuous work, which now women can use for gainful economic work. It also tremendously helps in improving their health. Right to life in these days depends on right to energy. Right to energy, therefore, for SEWA members is a human right. SEWA stands at the crossroads of promoting these two rights locally, nationally, and globally. SEWA sisters have come thus far and have poised to chart their way ahead. SEWA also believes that rights have limited meaning if corresponding responsibility is not performed. Every right has a responsibility attached to that. SEWA sisters learned this from Gandhiji. As a result, SEWA sisters first perform their responsibilities before demanding the rights. How do we do that? So let me talk about right to access to credit. For the women, it also comes with the responsibility of savings attached to it. Therefore, at SEWA, we call it savings first. World over, more emphasis is placed on credit at the cost of savings and savings related services such as insurance and pension. However, SEWA's experience shows that when income increases, women have small but ready cash in disposable in their hands. The women therefore prefer savings as they are already in debt caused due to repeated disasters, illnesses, lack of ownership of productive tools or assets such as land, house, or water. Women, anyway, are victims of almost regular effects of natural disasters, such as droughts and floods. Therefore, the savings related services that the collectives try to provide includes ways of repaying debt buy new assets such as land or house or well or cattle, expand the existing economic activity in volume or in diversity, and that generates surplus for savings and helps plan mitigate the impact and reduce the possibility of being vulnerable to natural disasters. Worldwide, interest in giving credit to women has unusual emphasis on borrowing. However, for SEWA members, savings is hardly seen as a basis for economic growth or prosperity, and that is what the SEWA members emphasize on. Savings is economic discipline. Savings is consumer restraint. Savings is not seen as a goal in itself at SEWA. So, right to credit is achieved by performing responsibility to save. Similar is the case when we talk about right to education. When SEWA members demand right to education, they also understand that it has the responsibility of educating the girl child. Thus, at SEWA, we call them as the life schools or the schools that help in strengthening the livelihoods and educating our members and their young daughters. They've always believed that women should demand for education rather than forcing them or compelling them to send their daughters to school. Therefore, in 2000, during the annual general meeting of SEWA, the leaders themselves demanded for education. As elected representative Shanta Ben tells, up till now, I lived in a world of darkness. But with education, I can read the numbers on the bus, I can read the signboards, I can read the circulars. I suddenly feel as if I'm in a new world. I realize that I do not have to depend on anyone. SEWA also focuses, therefore, on educating the young daughters and the young members along with right to education. Similarly, when we talk about right of vendors to do vending on the streets, has the responsibility of keeping the streets clean and safe. Poor women as citizens have right to city. Right to city means right to work in cities. Right to work in cities means right to hawk or vend in the streets. Thus, at SEWA, we very much believe, and our approach is that it is the right, a human right for every individual to be able to live a life of dignity and self respect so that the world is full of hope, opportunities, and happiness for every human being. The human rights also mean right to work, right to street vending, right to credit, right to assets, right to energy. When SEWA sisters look at their lives, they come up with all kinds of different rights. Right to water, right to sanitation, right to health, right to mobility, right to education, right to finance and banking, right to connectivity, and right to energy. When poor women are on their way to achieve or realize the above rights, they are on their way to achieve or realize human rights, which relieves them from hunger and starvation, which gives them the freedom from poverty, and they really are able to live a life of dignity and self respect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rima. Amazing, the warmth and the strength and the courage that we just heard about. Thank you so much. It's time for me to present another amazing person, a woman, up on stage, and it's time for a little discussion between these two women. I just also want to encourage you, if you want to ask any questions, there will be time for questions for the last 5 minutes, so close to 10 o'clock, because we're going 5 minutes over schedule, if that's okay with you. This is so interesting. We don't want to miss a minute. So please give an applause for Kristina Henschen, who is the Secretary General of the Swedish Trade Union Solidarity Support Organization, Union to Union, and the President of Concord, Sweden. Give it up.
Thank you.
So please have a seat, and we will now enjoy and learn more from this discussion between these two amazing women.
Thank you, Kayo, and good morning to all of you, and namaste,
Namaste.
Rema.
Good morning.
I'm so pleased to be here with you today and to hear your lecture on the important work that you are doing.
Mhm.
You said a line that went straight into my heart, and I'm sure many of the people in the audience reacted in the same way when you said poverty is a form of violence with the concept of the society. This is very, very important. This is something that was formulated by Ella Batz, and she also wrote a book called Anuband. And I wanted to start there and ask you, because SEWA, as an organization, as part of the Gandhi movement, Mahatma Gandhi movement in India, has this concept of Anuband. What this old traditional word Anuband, what does it mean? What is it? Can you explain the concept?
Thank you so much for bringing Anuband into Sweden and into this room. And it's very much that Gandhiji always believed, and Anuband in our language means correlation, interconnectedness. We're all interconnected. The way I think also affects, my sisters. The way I think affects my family. The way I think affects the society. So the way I think, my actions also start happening in that way. So Gandhiji very much believed in strengthening the local rural village economy. And so the 100 miles concept, which is what Anubandh talks about, of interconnectedness and correlation, of, local production, local consumption, and that's how you generate more and more employment opportunities. So we think that Anubandh, or correlation and interconnectedness, is an alternative to the issues and challenges of climate change that the world today is struggling with. We don't know that that's an answer, but we definitely believe that's an alternative. And it's not just a concept, a theoretical concept, but Seva sisters have practiced it for over 3 decades, and it's based on our experience that Ila Bhatt, our founder, has brought about this, which was presented at COP21 in Paris last year. And to give examples of, when we talk about rural workers, how do you increase the collective strength and bargaining power of the rural workers? And everybody thinks that for the rural workers, either they go and work as casual laborers or agriculture laborers, or they have to migrate to the urban areas and start working again as, workers on the construction sites or doing odd jobs. But we designed a whole rural distribution network. And let me tell you, that too in partnership with a private multinational corporation like Unilever. And every producer of the village, we procure from those producers, we grade it, process it, package it, and we redistribute it in the villages, thereby giving fair returns to the producers, be it small farmers, be it salt miners, be it weavers, be it artisans. and it also gives food security to the households, and it in the process generates a lot of employment opportunities, and it strengthens the livelihoods and the rural economy. So today we have around 254,000 producers.
It's amazing. I mean, Anuband, as you describe it, is that everything is connected in an ecosystem. And I think this is a concept that we should really revive. Also here, you're doing an amazing job on this in India with your 2 million organized women. But here in the darkest, we're heading towards a very dark time. Um, and we are viewing a shrinking space in the world where in the latest 3 years, 69 countries have taken measures to restrict the civil society, to limit our way of working. And the concept of Anuban seems as one of the solutions to this. You come from one of the countries where the restriction of the civil society is very obvious, at least from outside, and I'm sure from inside. On the other hand, I would say that women has always been restricted culturally, and the trade unions have always been in the front of democratic fights. So maybe we also have an advantage where we can use those tools that we have elaborated for so long, being hunted and repressed, that we now can use very effectively. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe the space for the civil society and for organizing is shrinking. And whether you call it an insider experience or an outsider experience, but I think at SEWA, we have always believed and we have deep faith that women are going to be the change makers. The future lies in the hands of women. And therefore, I think organizing, building capacity of the women, leading to asset creation, building their leadership skills and capabilities, giving them access to basic support services is an empowering process. That's the approach, a very integrated approach that we have taken at SEWA. And therefore, I think the repressive actions or, the repressive policies, but when you have organized the local women and under their leadership, the local communities, it's a whole community driven process. And therefore, I think nobody can stop a community from wanting to bring about a change. So, how do you create demand from the bottom? And therefore, at SEWA, we never consider that our members are at the base of the pyramid. We always consider that they are the wheels of the pyramid. And it's these wheels of the pyramid, the very active women workers, which keep the economy so vibrant of our country, that today it is achieving this phenomenal growth rate as well. And therefore, we very firmly believe that if you invest in organizing women, if you invest in building their leadership and managerial capabilities, I don't think there's any looking back.
Uh, you say that women are the agents of change here. For me, with this Western background, I understand it as a very practical way of feminism, where you understand that there is a change that has to be done, and you do it very practically, and you see the power structures that you want to target. Um, is that so? Would you say that this is a very a core value in your organization, or is this a dynamics of feminism that you do not use? How do you perceive that as discourse in SEWA?
It's a very interesting question and a perspective. But I think at SEWA, we very strongly believe in value based organizing. And the first and the foremost value being, believing in the Gandhian ideology and philosophy is that we at SEWA come together as poor as women and as workers, no matter what caste or community or religion we belong to. Also, we have a deep faith that, once the women get organized, they have their capacity. It is under the women's leadership that the whole family starts getting involved. So, therefore, we are not a feminist kind in the so called feminist world, but yes, definitely we want the whole community to participate in the process of change, but under women's leadership. And I think that's the first and the foremost difference. The second major difference in our approach to organizing is that we are not organizing here to fight against an employer or a contractor or a government or a private company. We are coming together as women, as workers, as poor to fight, and our fight is against poverty. And I think that is what keeps us very much focused in our direction, which is that we want to end poverty, we want to bring dignity and self-respect.
That's much more difficult to fight against poverty than a bad employer, I would say. It's very interesting that you're managing to do something that many of the traditional free and democratic trade unions do not achieve. You reach out to the poorest of the poor in the informal sector. You showed us many excellent examples of the target groups that you are working with. Um, how do you see yourself? I mean, what are the differences from a more traditional trade union that organizes the formal economy and SEWA that achieves this extremely important? I have to say also that we have to carry with us the understanding that all over the world the precarious work conditions are increasing. The informal sectors and the informal economy in the world, where people have no security, no um, living wages, and are extremely exploited. It's increasing all over the world right now, and it's estimated by ILO to be approximately 50 to 70% of the economy in the poor countries in the world. So how do you see yourself as, I mean, what are the keys to your success in achieving this, and how do you see yourself in a different to traditional trade unions?
So I think we ourselves also had a big struggle in registering SEWA as a trade union because there's no formal employer-employee relationship. And so where is an employer and who are the employees who are registering? But these are all own account or self-employed women workers. And there are 4 categories of women workers that we organize. Women who work out of their homes. So these are garment workers, artisans, incense stick rollers, or cigar rollers, or kite makers, whose work is not even accounted for as work. And that's the big challenge that SEWA has taken over. The second major category is of vendors and hawkers. So as I was talking about, women who earn their living by vending fruits, vegetables, other eatables or old clothes on the streets. The third category is of um, manual workers and service providers. So these are women who collect waste, who work on construction, agriculture workers, farm workers, or, waste recyclers. And the fourth category, which is emerging very rapidly, is of producers. So women who not only invest their own labor, but they invest a small capital and produce. And how do these women get recognized as workers? So that's the first and the foremost challenge. And 93% of the workforce in our country is in the informal sector. Only 7% is in the formal sector in our country. And I think the second major challenge for us is that, organizing and the fight against poverty is a process. There's no shortcut to that, and one has to move at the pace of these women workers. And nobody really understands this. Poverty cannot be ended in a project of 3 or 5 years. Otherwise, this world would have been like a heaven where everybody has such a wonderful life. But that is what is very difficult for a lot of governments, policymakers, donors to understand, that you cannot address poverty in a project mode. It needs a longer term investment of time and resources.
But how do you actually approach the issue of social dialogue in when trade unions work? It is not only workplace issues as we know it, it's also the pressure to be an actor in the society, to be a voice in the society, and the pressure for social safety nets and the social dialogue. How do you, if you do not, in this very complex environment, can you have this dialogue with the government in order to push those issues? I know that you have amazing built up contributions to social safety as daycare centers and health points and so on. But how do you pursue the actual dialogue issue with the government as a trade union in the informal economy?
So I think when women come together and when they organize, they feel that they are not alone. There are thousands and thousands of women like them. So it helps in building their confidence, and that helps them, it builds their collective strength. The second approach that SEWA has taken is that we identify what are the needs or the issues that our members have to face and which directly affects the lives and livelihoods. And then how do you leverage the existing government programs or policies to address those issues? So it brings in the participation of the government, and also it brings in the participation of the women and the community. So in a way, as a union, you are making the government come closer to the people that it has to really work for. And if there are no government policies or programs, we advocate and lobby for it. And rather than creating parallel structures and then, demanding and fighting. And that's how I think we have been able to address. And I think the integrated approach which works, where we work on healthcare, on childcare. So we create alternative models, which, the governments, the policymakers, the donors can look at. And then how can they work on scaling up those alternatives? So I think that's how we try to address, rather than being a confrontationist trade union. Of course, you have to confront at times, but you also bring about alternatives, as you mentioned in the very beginning, Anubandh. Climate change, and there's no point just having slogans and, fighting for it. But what's an alternative which, the informal sector itself has brought out? So that's the approach that SEWA has taken.
And what kind of difficulties do you meet in this work? I know that we have had a lot of reports here where the Indian government themselves claim that they have a large corruption in the country, and therefore they have monetized the economy. Um, how do you work with those structures when they themselves claim that they are extremely corrupt? In showing the good examples that
Good
you
question,
talk
but I think it's taken us almost 4 decades, where you build your members' own economic organizations and you take them to scale. So we call it as, how do you bring the informal sector organizations into the mainstream? And once you are in the mainstream, then your challenge is that how do you move ahead, rather than again moving back to the periphery and the fringes and then getting marginalized. So therefore, SEWA has its own bank, which is a full-fledged registered cooperative bank. We have our own managers school, which works on building the managerial and leadership capabilities of our members. We have our own federations. We have member-owned companies as well. So these are the economic or business organizations which are owned by the members of the trade union. So it's a joint action of union and cooperatives. And I think when there is corruption, one has to really focus on the values and not succumb to the pressures. So those are the challenges that SEWA has to live with. And demonetization, which is a recent phenomena in our country, we have to very closely monitor and see how it is impacting the livelihoods and the lives of our members. Are they losing work? Are they losing their daily wages? What are its implications on the nutrition, on the healthcare, on the different facets of our members' lives? And therefore, how do you then advocate with the government, with the banks, with the employers, with the markets? So these are the different difficulties or challenges. But I think when you are in the mainstream, how do you be, shaping the policies rather than influencing it at a later stage? And that's what the new economy, organizing for SEWA is, where we have 40% of our young members coming in. Their profiles are very different from the first generation members. So, what's the new economy organizing of the informal sector workers, where you are influencing the policies? No, but you are shaping the policies. And how does that happen? That's what SEWA is right now focusing on.
When it comes to a practical level, how do you actually? I know that you are an organization that is extremely faith-based and value-based. I mean, value-based, I would say, and puts itself outside of the conflicts of the caste system and outside of the conflicts or any differences of religion. But how do you manage the extreme challenge on gender stereotypes and repression that is going on? We all have followed with this horrendous happening with Jyoti Singh, the murder of a young doctor student at a bus in in India, and it is very clear that the challenges and the cultural attitudes in India is extremely challenging, where women are malnourished. They are given food latest in the families. They are when they are sent to work, even though they are becoming the breadwinner. Those economic arguments will not help them to gain power in the family, and they are taken back to the traditional context. How do you work with this?
Ours is a large country, and within a country, I would say there are like 10 different countries as well, and it's such a diverse country. But I would still say that nothing is key than organizing. When women get organized, when they come together, and I think when women have economic security, they are able to deal with very many of the social issues which are imposed on them by the society, by the community as well. And there are numerous experiences that I can share when women have organized, they have overcome the caste issues. We have 2 million women who belong to all kinds of different castes and communities and religions. But I would again emphasize that it's the values that you really inculcate, and the more you invest in members' education on those values, it is very clear to every member of SEWA that at SEWA they come together to fight against poverty. So if we start discussing caste and religion, then it's not going to help them in any way. And though we respect all the castes and all the religions, but when it comes to work, the focus is on every poor is poor no matter wherever in the world you are. The issues of the poor are the same, and that's why I think a trade union approach has really helped SEWA remain, you know, a very clean fabric and not fragmented. We ourselves have come across many such challenges. The riots of 2002 in Gujarat, or you had a very major earthquake, you had floods, everything. But why did SEWA remain intact and it kept on growing? The membership kept growing year after year. It's because women felt economically secured. When there is a riot or when there is an earthquake, and the next hour you go to your members, they don't ask for, charity. All they want is work. And I think it's with that work that they want to rebuild their lives and livelihoods in a very dignified way. So I think for us, we very firmly believe that it's the value based organizing, but it's a slow process.
It takes time.
It takes time.
What can we bring with you? What can we learn from you and your important work? What can the audience here when they go out from here? What do you want them to carry with themselves?
I think there's nothing to learn from me. Unless you are in love, you don't really experience what love is. So, unless you really start working with the poor, you don't experience poverty. And once you experience poverty, it gives you the biggest lessons of life on what simplicity means, What is it how do you feel when being a poor? What kind of vulnerabilities it brings? So I think the biggest learning comes from the more experiences that one has, and I think that's the message I would bring from our members, that the more we work, the more we learn, and the more we learn, the more bigger work and the bigger challenges we would be able to take.
Thank you so much, Rema
Thank you.
Nanavaty. We will invite the audience for some questions in the end here. Yes, we have a microphone. And please present yourself when you ask a question. No, it doesn't work.
Ska vi se om den här på då.
Technical complications. Thank you very much for your speech. My name is Elizabeth Hole, and I had the pleasure of visiting SEWA in Ahmedabad a few years back. The work you're doing is obviously extremely impressive, and the love shared and given amongst the sisters of SEWA is also very impressive. At that time, which is my question, you were also telling us that the system as such is also being tried in other places on earth now, amongst those, I think, parts of South Africa. Would you like to tell us just a few words about if that's continued, and if so, in any other nations? Thank you.
Should we take all the
Yes,
questions?
let's take 3 questions in a row.
My name is Lars, and I have a question that's almost the same, but not really. Maybe if you've been around in Europe for a while, you've seen that there is Roma people all over Europe begging for money. And this is the biggest problem with poverty we have in Europe, I think. It's very inspirational to listen to your speech, and I know that the Gandhian philosophy thinks that it's not a dignified life to beg for your livelihood. Would it be possible to network and to get Roma organizations from Romania and Bulgaria so on to come and visit you and learn from your work in India, you think?
So the first was on the international duplication or using of the methods internationally. The second one was on the Roma um, groups and if they can visit and come. Do we have a third question here? I'm looking in the audience. No, okay.
So,
Please.
as I was referring to in our conversation as well, poor are poor, no matter in which part of the world you live, and the issues of the poor are also the same. So, I think for the last 2 decades or so, SEWA has started working also in other countries. So, we work in our neighboring countries of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, and Myanmar as well. And we've also started working in some of the countries in Africa, so South Africa, in Ethiopia, in Ghana. So I think it's the women to women organizing, and we don't believe in a top down model, but we have the women come, and partly I would also answer to this your question is that women come and experience what SEWA has been doing, and when they learn from it and then they adapt it, when they see that, oh, these are also all poor women, they also had similar issues and struggles, and yet if they have been able to overcome, maybe we could also do it in our country. And that's how they start organizing in their countries, and we as a resource organization provide whatever inputs that are needed in terms of hand holding, in terms of capacity building. So that's the whole approach, and I partly answered your question. Definitely, we always think that it's our moral responsibility to hold hands of, poor wherever they are. But I would also like to add here that, you know, every human being has some or the other skill, and it's our responsibility as an organization to bring out that inherent skill and strength in them and bring them away from begging, because I think that's not a right approach. It takes away the dignity and the self respect. They are looked down upon. So, definitely, if there are organizations which would like to come and on an exposure visit, we'll be happy to welcome them.
Thank you very much, Rema Nanavaty.
Thank you.
And to quote you, right to life is right to work. Thank you so much for telling about your work. And I think you are the future, and your way of working is very inspiring and the future in order to spread the word of Anuband further internationally.
Thank you so much. And I think we always end with a message from our members. So if you give me 2 minutes, I'll have a two-line to sing. Maybe some of you may be familiar with the song. I sing it in our language, which is Ame par karishu, Ame par karishu, Ame par karishu ek din. ઓહો ઊંડા અંતરમાં અમને છે વિશ્વાસ, અમે પાર કરીશું એક દિન. This is deep in our hearts. We do believe we shall overcome someday. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we all can agree that this was an amazing, perfect start of the second day of the Human Rights Days. A warm applause again for Rema
Thank you.
Nanavaty and
Thank you.
Kristina Henschen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I am humbled and deeply filled with respect.
Thank you very
And
much.
now it's time for you to rest a little